Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Wolff. I have been an author and an illustrator most of my life. I've done 55 books, picture books for children, and I got there because I loved to draw ever since I was a little girl. So when I was little, I grew up in the small, cold state of Vermont, and I was surrounded by animals. And my sister, I have one little sister, and she also knew exactly what she wanted to do since she was 5 years old. She wanted to be a veterinarian. And guess what she is now? A veterinarian. So we both knew what we wanted to do, and she collected animals. She had a guinea pig, she had a hamster, she had a parakeet, she had a small, a miniature baby caiman. She had pigs, she had a horse, we always had dogs. And so I was surrounded by animals, and that's still my favorite thing to draw. I am a very restless person who gets bored easily. So I don't like to work in the same technique every time. I like to mix it up. I also feel like some subject matter needs more detail and a finer line. So for instance, in these Miss Bindergarten books, I did 7 of these in all, and then a couple of easy readers too. I had to put in a ton of detail. So I'll show you how pen and ink and watercolor works really well when you have a ton of detail. Like, look at this picture. There's 26 kids in this picture, characters, plus Miss Bindergarten, plus the school bus. So I did these with pen and ink and watercolor. But other books that I do, I think books that maybe are more oriented towards nature, I like to do in a very old-fashioned technique called linoleum block printing. This is the very first way that books were reproduced back in, I don't know, medieval times probably. And imagine making a giant rubber stamp. I carve it with sharp tools, and then once it's done, all the black parts are parts of the rubber stamp. And I print it with black ink, just black ink. And then once that's dry, I take watercolor paints and I use those to create all this color and the soft parts. So I can get this nice gradation from dark purple to light down here. You can't do that with just a plain old print. You have to combine painting and printmaking. And I also do books in collage. I do books in straight up watercolor with maybe a little fine brush for the line. I didn't think this needed a pen and ink line, but I like a lot of color. I think my books, even though they're different in medium and technique, all hold together because I have a strong sense of color. In fact, if you look at them, you can tell my 3 favorite colors are red, yellow, and blue. And this follows through all my books. There's a lot of animals in them, a lot of nature, often a lot of children. I just finished a book, though, called This Tractor's Year, where I had to learn to draw a tractor, which was not my favorite thing. But by the end, I was very good at it. So a lot of people wonder, where do ideas come from? My newest book, which is going to come out this coming Christmas, is called A Tractor's Year, and I never liked tractors that much. But I know this little boy named Patrick who loves tractors, and I love Patrick. So I thought, well, what could I do? What kind of book could I do that would make Patrick super happy? So I have done books about the months of the year before. My very first book was called A Year of Birds, and I did a book called A Year of Beasts, and I did a book called When Lucy Goes Out Walking, which is about the months of the year. So I like the months of the year. I love seasons and, sequence like that. So I thought, I'm going to do a book about a tractor's year. And I decided to tell the story from the point of view of the tractor. So I think it's a he, but I'm not really sure. I do know that the tractor is the VIP of the farm, and can do everything. And in every month, the tractor has a different job. And I hope that everyone loves it as much as Patrick's going to. So I started out to be a pretty average kid artist. I didn't really know how to draw, but because I love drawing, I kept practicing. I think it really helps if you love it, because it's a lot of work. You know, you have to really spend time putting in the hours to get better at something. Yes, you can take classes, yes, you can study, but really practice is the only thing that's going to make you better in the long run. My biggest tip, and I think this is true for if you're 5 or if you're, 95, is you have to actually look at what you're drawing. Some people think they know what a tree looks like, and they'll draw sort of a cartoony tree that looks like a lollipop. But if you sit down and look at a tree and look at the way the trunk is and how the branches grow and out of the trunk, and then what happens once they get out towards the twigs, and can you see the sky through the tree? Can you see, do you see dense parts or light parts? Do you see where the sun is shining on the tree and making it look bright? Do you see where the tree is casting shadow and making shade underneath? All those things seem sort of simple, but they're all really important details when you're drawing something. I'm always writing. I'm always thinking about book ideas, and I'm always drawing, because if I take some time off from drawing, I will get out of practice. Say if I got sick, I'd be out of practice when I recovered, and I'd have to spend a day drawing and throwing things away, because it's a muscle memory as much as anything. So I have been self-employed since 1984. I make my living by creating books and then talking about them to people who love books. I can talk to students, I can talk to teachers, I can talk to librarians, I can talk to parents, I can talk to grandparents, I can talk to booksellers. And because of that, I've gotten to go to some really interesting places. I've been all over the United States except for Alaska, and I think I've been to every other state. And I visited probably with thousands of school children, easily thousands of school children and hundreds of schools. And I got to go to India and talk to kids in India about books, and I got to go to Japan and talk to kids about books there. And the nice thing about going anywhere else is that because I'm self-employed, every time I go somewhere, I can take it off my taxes, because I'm going to get a book idea, I guarantee it. So Miss Bindergarten Stays Home from Kindergarten and all the books about Miss Bindergarten were written by a man named Joseph Slate. And these were not the first books I did with Joseph Slate, though. So before the Miss Bindergarten books, we did a book together called Who is Coming to Our House? And it's a book about the Christmas story where it starts out, "Who is coming to our house, says Mouse. Someone is coming." And it turns out that it's Mary and Joseph coming to the stable on the night that Jesus is born. And it's all animals anticipating the arrival of Mary and Joseph. And of course, at the very end, they come in, Mary gives birth to Jesus, and then all the animals surround the family. And so it's told from the animals' point of view, and it's a very, very important event which requires some preparation, just like the first day of kindergarten. So when he sent me the first Miss Bindergarten story, he intended Miss Bindergarten to be a human. And all the students were supposed to be human too. But I didn't think that would be very funny. And I had a kindergartner at the time who was in a class in San Francisco that was just so full of diversity. And I was thinking, oh, how am I going to show everybody? So I thought, well, maybe I could just change everybody to an animal. And I got to pick all the animals that the students were. So Adam, little boy Adam, becomes little boy alligator. And beaver and cat and dog and elephant and frog and iguana and a gorilla and so on, all through the alphabet. And then I had to choose who was Miss Bindergarten going to be. And luckily at the time, I had a dog who was a border collie named Pumpkin. And I thought, oh, border collies, perfect for teachers. They're very smart, they're very good at herding, and they're willing to work like dogs. So that's how those books came about. So authors and illustrators have a slightly different path to publication, because usually if I am offered a book just to illustrate, like Miss Bindergarten, the book has already been sold to the publisher. So some people will say, well, you know, we should do a book together. And I say, no, not until you sell it to a publisher, because being rejected is super common. I have been rejected with my books. In fact, one of my books called Wildfire was based on real life events in my family. And I tried to sell that book back in 2013 to a publisher I had been working with for a long time, and I expected to sell it. They said, no, I don't think we can sell this. And then time passed. Wildfire season kept getting longer and hotter and more serious because of climate change. In 2018, I took the book back to the publisher and I said, would you like to buy this now? Oh yes, we need this book now. And so you can be rejected and then accepted later. You can be rejected and rewrite a little bit and be accepted later. You can think about your book as maybe needing a different voice, a different narrator, a different setting, and small changes like that can mean that it's accepted later. So never throw anything away. Yeah, so my favorite book, which is sadly out of print, which is another thing that authors and illustrators have to endure quite often, because so many books are published every year, they can't all stay in print. That would be impossible. But my favorite book is called Stella and Roy, and I based it on something that happened with my two sons. I had to change one into a girl and rename him Stella, but that's author's prerogative, you know. And they were riding these big wheels. One had a big wheels and one had a little scooter with no pedals. And we were riding around a circular lake in San Francisco, and one of them kept stopping and getting off his big wheels and going and doing this and going doing that, totally distracted. And one of them just kept going, the little one, and he beat his brother around the lake. And at some point I thought, this reminds me of a fable that I've read called The Tortoise and the Hare, where the slow one wins the race. And so I wrote a story called Stella and Roy, where they race around the lake and Stella keeps getting distracted and Roy just keeps on rolling, and he gets to the popcorn stand first. I don't know how to write this. My sister, who I mentioned before, her name's Peregrine Wolff, double carnivore there. She grew up to be an exotic animal veterinarian. So that means that she doesn't take care of dogs or cats or horses or cows. She takes care of elephants and gorillas and penguins and boa constrictors. And she, like me, has known since she was a little girl what she wanted to be, and she spent her whole childhood caring for animals, loving animals and caring for them in any way she could. And she went to high school and cared for animals. She went to college and cared for animals. She went to vet school and cared for animals. And then she worked at several zoos, and she started the hospital at Disney's Animal Kingdom in Florida. And then she became a wildlife vet. And then she had a little practice taking care of pot-bellied pigs in Southern California. And now she lives in Florida, and she has 30 endangered gopher tortoises on her land. And she's still taking care of animals, and I think she would make a great subject for a book. But I don't want her to tell the story, and I don't want to tell the story, and I'm trying to think about who should tell the story. So if you have an idea, let me know. I have a website. You can contact me at ashleywolff.com.